Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
The crowd began chanting his name before he even appeared. Aegis! 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 The sound rolled to the Coliseum of Caranby like thunder trapped inside a steel lung. 100,000 spectators filled the tiered stands beneath the twin suns, their silhouettes flickering against energy shields that shimmered faintly in anticipation of violence. Then the arena gates opened. He stepped through smoke and light as if emerging from a star. Aegis Prime. His armor absorbed the sunlight and returned it as a cold, white gleam. Layer upon layer of adaptive nanocarbon plating interlocked seamlessly across his frame. Microreactors pulsed beneath the surface, visible only as faint rivers of cobalt glow that trace along his limbs and chest. Gravitational stabilizers adjusted with each step, bending dust away from him in soft spirals. Every movement carried weight, not just physical mass, but reputation. He had ended the siege of Talrith by standing alone at a breach point for 17 hours. He had survived atmospheric re-entry without a vessel. Once, a war cruiser had fired on him out of pride. He had walked away. Children wore miniature replicas of his helmet. Entire systems signed defense treaties because he existed. The commentators' voices boomed overhead. Structural density equivalent to reinforced starship hull. No recorded breach event in 12 years of deployment. The definition of absolute defense. Aegis stopped at the center of the arena floor. The impact of his final step sent a controlled tremor through the ground, enough to remind the audience that this was no theatrical display. He raised one armored fist. The chant became a roar. Then the opposite gate opened. No smoke, no dramatic lighting, just a soft mechanical sigh. She walked out alone. Lyra Vale wore a fitted suit of woven silver fabric that seemed almost liquid in the light. No visible shielding emitters. No reinforced plating. No weapon harness. Her boots made the faintest whisper against the arena floor. The crowd's roar faltered. Then laughter rippled outward in confused waves. Aegis tilted his helmet slightly. His internal sensors immediately began cataloging her. Mass, unremarkable. Heart rate, steady. No detectable energy signatures beyond baseline biological function. No concealed armament. Probability of threat, 0.0003%. He opened a private channel to the officiating council. This is an error. The council's reply came cool and composed. No error. Proceed. Lyra stopped 20 meters away from him. Up close, she looked younger than the holofeed suggested. Dark hair pulled back. Eyes that did not flinch under the glare of his armor's photonic lenses. She was not trembling. That interested him. You requested this match, Aegis said, voice amplified and resonant. You understand what I am? Yes, she replied. Her voice carried naturally, somehow reaching the farthest seats without mechanical aid. You're a system optimized to resist force. A faint murmur moved through the crowd. That's an oversimplification, he said. It's an accurate one. The air between them tightened. Above, the broadcast drones adjusted their angles, focusing on the contrast, an armored colossus and a woman who appeared dressed for a laboratory demonstration. Aegis shifted his stance slightly, the arena floor indenting beneath his boots. Withdraw. There is no outcome here that benefits you. Lyra's expression softened, not with fear, but with something like sympathy. I'm not here to defeat you, she said. Then you're here to lose. A pause. No, she said gently. I'm here to listen. The gong sounded. The first second passed in stillness. The second ended in catastrophe. Aegis moved. To the human eye, he vanished. Thrusters ignited, without visible flame, gravitational drives compressing space beneath him. He crossed the arena in less than a blink, fists drawn back, kinetic amplifiers surging. The impact point glowed white. The floor disintegrated under force. A shockwave erupted outward, rattling containment shields and sending dust into a spiraling wall. The crowd screamed in exhilaration. When the debris cleared, he was alone. Aegis's visor recalibrated instantly. Thermal sweep. Infrared, neutrino trace, air displacement modeling. She stood behind him, not running, not teleporting, simply standing as though she had always been there. He pivoted, faster this time. She hadn't disturbed the dust. His internal processors spiked anomaly warnings. "You moved," he said. "Yes." "How?" She tilted her head slightly. "You assume motion requires speed." The audience fell into uneasy silence. Aegis activated a localized shockwave burst, an expanding dome of force meant to flatten everything within a 100-meter radius. The arena flashed white. Lyra did not move. The energy field parted around her like wind around stone. No shielding signature detected. No counterforce measured. She stepped forward. "You're generating compensatory oscillations," she observed quietly. "Even now." "Enough." He increased output to combat configuration. The armor responded instantly. Plates shifted microscopically, sealing tighter. Microreactors spooled to full capacity. Defensive matrices layered over one another in shimmering geometries. The low hum of contained power deepened into something almost alive. Spectator shields brightened in response. He advanced on her deliberately this time. Every step heavy, measured, intentional. "Last warning," he said. Lyra exhaled slowly. "May I?" she asked. He almost laughed. "You may try." She closed the final distance herself. No rush, no fear, just quiet curiosity. She raised her hand. From the stands, it looked absurd. From inside his helmet, it looked harmless. Her fingers hovered inches from his chest plate, over the central lattice node that anchored the entire defensive structure. His threat analysis remained negligible. Then she touched him, barely, 2 fingertips against polished nanocarbon. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then, a sound, not mechanical, not explosive. A single clear tone rang through the arena. It resonated inside his armor, inside his bones, inside the air itself. Aegis's internal diagnostics spiked red. Structural integrity deviation, 0.02%, 0.17%, 0.83%. A thin line appeared across his chest plate, a hairline fracture. The crowd gasped as one. He stepped back instinctively. The fracture spread a centimeter more before halting. Silence swallowed the stadium. Aegis stared down at his chest. The armor had endured asteroid impacts. It had absorbed antimatter pulses. It had survived the crushing gravity of a dying moon. Nothing had ever marked it. Nothing. Lyra lowered her hand. Her voice, when she spoke, was almost apologetic. "There it is," she whispered. Aegis looked up at her, something unfamiliar rising beneath the shock. Not pain, not anger, uncertainty. "You didn't strike me," he said. "No." "You didn't apply force." "No." The fracture caught the light of the twin suns, thin and unmistakable. "What did you do?" he demanded. Lyra met his gaze calmly. "I said hello." The fracture did not disappear. Aegis Prime stood motionless at the center of the ruined arena, staring at the thin silver line across his chest plate as if it might retract out of embarrassment. It didn't. Inside the armor, his systems ran frantic diagnostics. Microfracture mapping initiated. Material cohesion variance detected. Adaptive reinforcement compensating. Compensating. The suit tightened around him. Nanocarbon fibers reweaving, redistributing stress across millions of microscopic nodes. The fracture dulled, but it did not seal. That had never happened before. He lifted his gaze to Lyra Vale. She hadn't moved. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't triumphant. She looked focused. "You altered the lattice," he said, voice low now, stripped of spectacle. "What field are you projecting?" "No field," she replied. "I match one." The crowd murmured uneasily. The commentators had gone silent. Aegis spread his arms slightly, letting the armor flare in full combat configuration. Plates shifted outward. Stabilizers deployed along his spine and legs. The air thickened as gravitational compensators activated. "Then match this." He struck the ground with both fists. The arena floor imploded. A compression wave ripped outward in a perfect circle, pulverizing stone into particulate dust and hurling it skyward in a spiraling column. The shock wave slammed against containment shields with enough force to rattle the upper tiers. Lyra stood at the epicenter. For a split second, she vanished in the storm. Then she reappeared through thinning dust, untouched. Aegis's sensor screamed. There was no protective barrier around her, no measurable distortion, no displacement of force. The compression wave had simply folded. He launched forward again, faster than before. This time he didn't rely on brute impact. His gauntlet split open mid-flight, revealing a concentrated plasma emitter. A beam of coherent stellar heat lanced toward her, hot enough to carve through cruiser hulls. Lyra raised her hand, not to block, but to place her fingertips lightly against the beam's path. The plasma flickered, not deflected, not dispersed. Its intensity began to oscillate. Aegis saw it immediately. Frequency instability in the emission pattern. The beam destabilized, collapsed inward, and imploded into a harmless shimmer of light that scattered like dying embers. His arm unit overloaded and shut down with a sharp crack. The crowd gasped. She stepped closer. "You see," she said softly, "it's not about strength. It's about timing." He disengaged the damaged emitter and switched to missile deployment. Micro-projectiles burst from his shoulders in precise spiral formation, each programmed with adaptive tracking and explosive yield. They curved toward her from every angle. Lyra closed her eyes. Just for a moment, the missiles began to hum, not from their engines. From within, their trajectories wavered. The spiraling formation tightened, not around her, but around itself. Each projectile drifted slightly out of sync with its guidance algorithms. A half millisecond, a quarter, just enough. They collided midair in a chain of muted detonations far above her head. Aegis landed heavily on the fractured floor, boots cracking stone. "You're interfering with my control systems." "No," she said. "Your systems are interfering with themselves." He stared at her. She gestured lightly toward his armor. "Your suit is constantly compensating, micro-adjusting for pressure, temperature, momentum, electrical flux. It's never still, never silent. Every layer hums. That hum is stability." "It's tension," she corrected gently. Aegis activated full-spectrum scanning, widening his sensory range beyond the physical. He tuned into subatomic vibration signatures, searching for external manipulation. That's when he heard it, not through his ears, through the armor, a faint tone, so subtle he had always filtered out as background noise, the harmonic resonance of the suit's lattice-maintaining structural cohesion. Lyra took another step forward. "Everything has a natural frequency," she continued. "Glass, steel, bone, even stars. Strike the right note at the right amplitude." She lifted her hand again, and the structure does the rest. He didn't retreat this time. He couldn't. He needed to understand. She placed 2 fingers against his shoulder plating. The tone rang again, lower than before, deeper. The fracture across his chest flared brighter and then multiplied. Hairline cracks raced across his shoulder like lightning frozen in silver. The plate shattered outward in a crystalline burst. Fragments scattered across the arena floor, dissolving into inert dust before they landed. Inside the suit, emergency dampeners engaged. Structural integrity, 82%, 81%, 80%. Aegis staggered back. Pain lanced through him, not from impact, but from feedback. The suit and his nervous system were linked. Every destabilized note echoed through his body like a dissonant chord. "What are you doing?" he demanded, anger and disbelief colliding in his voice. Lyra's eyes opened fully now. "Listening," she repeated. He roared. The sound reverberated across the stadium as he triggered maximum output across all remaining systems. Thrusters ignited. Gravity wells spiked. Plasma arcs crackled along his limbs. The arena became a storm. He blurred across it in erratic bursts, striking from impossible angles. Each blow fractured the ground. Each impact sent tremors through the city beyond. Lyra did not match his speed. She adjusted her position with minimal motion, Small shifts of weight, subtle pivots, precise placement of her hand against the armor as he passed. Each touch produced another tone. Each tone widened the fractures. Breastplate, left thigh, right forearm, chime, chime, chime. The sounds layered into a haunting harmony that echoed through the arena. Aegis felt it now, not just externally, but internally. The armor's stabilizing hum had shifted. It was no longer a single cohesive frequency. It was a chorus unraveling. He lunged one final time, gathering every ounce of stored kinetic energy into a single descending strike meant to end the match in one cataclysmic blow. Lyra didn't dodge. She stepped inside the arc of his attack and pressed her palm flat against the center of his chest. The tone that rang out this time was not singular. It was a chord, perfectly in phase with the suit's internal resonance. For half a second, everything froze. Then the breastplate exploded outward in a radiant cascade of shards. Not violently, not chaotically, almost beautifully. The pieces separated along invisible geometric lines, dissolving midair into harmless particulate light. A shock wave rolled outward, but it carried no destructive force, only release. Aegis crashed to one knee. Half his armor was gone. Exposed underlayer plating flickered weakly where primary systems had failed. His breathing was audible now, raw and human inside the helmet. The crowd was utterly silent. Lyra stood before him, hand lowered. She was breathing harder now, though she tried not to show it. Resonance works both ways. He looked up at her, not with fury, but with something far more dangerous. Doubt. For the first time in 12 years of recorded battles, Aegis Prime understood a terrifying possibility. His armor had never been indestructible. It had only never met the right frequency. Dust drifted slowly through the arena, like falling ash. Half of Aegis Prime's armor lay scattered in crystalline fragments across the fractured floor. What remained clung to him in uneven sections, one gauntlet intact, portions of leg plating still humming weakly, the spine stabilizer flickering as it struggled to compensate for catastrophic imbalance. He knelt, one hand braced against stone. For the first time in years, he could feel the air on his skin through exposed seams in the suit. It felt cold. Across from him, Lyra Vale stood still, not advancing, not retreating. The twin suns reflected in her eyes, steady and unafraid. The crowd did not cheer. They did not breathe. Aegis rose slowly. The movement was heavier now, not because he lacked strength, but because something foundational had shifted. The armor's hum, once constant and reassuring, was fractured, out of phase, discordant. Inside the suit, diagnostic alerts cascaded. Harmonic lattice instability. Feedback loop amplification detected. Recommend full shutdown. He ignored them. You could have ended this, he said, voice no longer amplified to thunder. The damaged speakers gave a rough, human texture. When the breastplate shattered, yes. Why didn't you? Lyra studied him for a long moment. Because you're still fighting the wrong thing. He clenched his remaining armored fist. You're the only thing here. No, she said gently. I'm not. She stepped closer. He did not move to stop her. You're fighting the idea that you must never yield, she continued. Your suit is built around that principle. Resist every force. Counter every vector. Brace against everything. That's what keeps people alive. It also keeps tension trapped. A faint vibration pulsed through the remaining armor, almost as if it were reacting to her words. Aegis forced himself to stand fully upright despite the instability. Explain it. Lyra inclined her head slightly, as if he had finally asked the correct question. Your armor is a closed system, she said. It absorbs incoming energy and redistributes it internally to maintain structural integrity. But redistribution is an elimination. It stores microstress across the lattice. She gestured toward the cracked plates along his torso. Over time, those stresses create standing waves. Invisible, harmless, until something introduces a matching frequency. You, he said. Yes. He felt again the faint tone inside the armor. Now that he was aware of it, he couldn't unhear it. A constant, subtle vibration. Not unpleasant, but never silent. You're not overpowering it, he realized slowly. You're synchronizing with it. Lyra smiled faintly. Finally, he looked down at his chest. The fractures weren't spreading now, but they hadn't healed either. They glowed softly along geometric seams like fault lines in cooling lava. What happens if I strike you again? He asked. You accelerate the collapse, she replied calmly. Every impact forces the suit to compensate harder. The harder it compensates, the stronger the standing wave becomes. And if I stop, then the wave dissipates. He stared at her. The crowd shifted uneasily in the stands, sensing that something far more significant than a fight was unfolding. Aegis took a step forward. The armor whined in protest, micro-actuators straining to maintain alignment. Lyra didn't flinch. Touch it again, he said. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Are you certain? Yes. She approached until only a breath separated them. This close, he could see fine details he had missed before, the steadiness of her pulse at her throat, the slight tremor in her fingers. She wasn't immune to fear. She was choosing to move through it. Lyra placed her palm against the remaining intact portion of his chest plate. The tone rang out again. But this time, he didn't resist it. He didn't trigger countermeasures. He didn't increase output. He listened. The vibration traveled through the armor and into his body. Instead of bracing against it, he allowed it to pass through him. The suit's systems, still programmed to resist, attempted to amplify stabilizers, but he manually disengaged them. One by one, defensive matrix, offline, kinetic dampeners, offline, reactive compensation grid, offline. The armor's hum shifted. Lower, softer. The fractures stopped glowing. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. Yes, she whispered. A section of cracked plating near his collar loosened. Not shattering this time, but separating cleanly and falling to ground with a dull metallic sound. Not destroyed. Released. Aegis exhaled slowly. The remaining plates felt lighter now. You built it to fight the universe, Lyra said quietly. But the universe isn't always striking. Sometimes it's just moving. He looked at his gauntlet hand. For years, this armor had been his identity, his shield, his symbol, if it could be undone by a touch. What did that make him? He reached up to his helmet. The crowd leaned forward as one. With a soft hiss, the seals disengaged. Cool air rushed in. He lifted the helmet free. Gasps rippled through the stands. The face beneath was younger than legend suggested. Strong, yes, but lined with exhaustion. There were faint scars at his temples where neural links connected to the suit. He set the helmet gently on the fractured floor. Lyra withdrew her hand. The tone faded. Silence followed, not empty, but profound. He reached for the chest plate latches and disengaged them manually. The remaining armor separated in segments, each piece detaching without violence. Greaves, pauldrons, spine unit. Each one fell with a muted clang against stone. When the final stabilizer powered down, the arena became utterly still. No hum, no vibration, no tension coiled in metal. Just wind moving softly across the broken floor. Aegis stood there in a simple underlayer suit, human and unshielded beneath the twin suns. Lyra regarded him not as a victor, not as a defeated opponent, but as something unarmored in more ways than one. You see, she said gently, there's nothing for me to break now. He looked at the scattered fragments of what had once been considered invincible. You didn't destroy it, he said slowly. No, you showed it where it was already fragile. She nodded. High above, the broadcast drones hovered, capturing every second. The lesson was no longer about combat. It was about structure, about resistance, about what happens when something is built to endure everything except harmony. Aegis turned toward the crowd. For years, they had cheered his indestructibility. Now, they watched his vulnerability. He felt strangely lighter. End the match, he said quietly. The officiating council hesitated only a moment before the arena lights dimmed in acknowledgement. Lyra stepped back, giving him space. As medical teams cautiously approached the perimeter, neither of them moved to claim triumph. There had been no final blow, no decisive strike, only a realization. The strongest armor in the known systems had not fallen to force. It had unraveled in the presence of understanding. And in the quiet that followed, something far more powerful than invincibility began to take shape. The footage spread before the dust had fully settled, across the inner systems, across frontier colonies, across military academies and research institutes and quiet civilian networks where people replayed the moment in stunned silence. Not the explosions, not the shattered breastplate, but the pause. The instant when Aegis Prime powered down his armor and chose not to resist. Engineers froze the frame where the fracture first appeared and magnified it to molecular scale. Analysts overlaid acoustic models across the recorded audio of the chime. The tone itself was dissected, converted into waveforms, transmitted to laboratories light years away. The conclusion unsettled everyone. The armor had not failed. It had complied. Within weeks, the phenomenon had a name: harmonic convergence. Within months, it had another: the veil principle. Lyra disliked that one. Aegis stood in a research chamber overlooking what remained of his armor. It no longer resembled a warrior's shell. The plates had been separated and suspended in transparent containment fields, each fragment mapped by scanning arrays that traced residual stress patterns in glowing blue lines. Without the suit around him, he felt smaller. He also felt clearer. A wall of projection screens displayed models of the lattice structure as it had existed before the fracture, perfect geometric symmetry layered over microcompensation algorithms. "Your designers built it brilliantly," Lyra said from behind him. He didn't turn. "I know. They anticipated impact vectors from nearly every conceivable threat. I know." She stepped beside him and gestured to a highlighted section of the model. "But here, this node cluster, see how it overcorrects? Every time force was applied, it redistributed strain through recursive amplification. That's how it maintained structural integrity." "Yes," she said gently. "Short term." She altered the model. The stress lines accumulated across thousands of simulated battles. The lattice glowed brighter with each engagement, not from damage, but from stored tension. "It never released," she said. "It only endured." Aegis folded his arms. For years he had believed endurance was the highest form of strength. "You're saying it was doomed," he said. "No," she shook her head. "I'm saying it was incomplete." He finally looked at her. "You could have weaponized this," he said. "Collapse fleets, dismantle planetary shields, topple governments in an afternoon." Her gaze didn't waver. Resonance works both ways. He understood the implication. To shatter something through harmonic alignment, one had to open oneself to the same frequencies. The energy exchange was mutual, precise, dangerous. "What would have happened," he asked quietly, "if I hadn't powered down?" She considered the question carefully. "The cascade would have accelerated," she said. "Your armor would have fragmented violently. The feedback through your neural link," she hesitated. "It might have stopped your heart." Silence settled between them. "You risked that," he said. "Yes." "Why?" Lyra turned toward the suspended fragments of nanocarbon. "Because every civilization we encounter builds thicker walls," she said softly. "Bigger fleets, harder shields. We keep escalating resistance." She walked toward the containment field, studying the fractured breastplate. But resistance accumulates stress, not just in materials, in cultures, in people. He followed her gaze. "You saw loneliness," he said. She nodded faintly. The armor's frequency wasn't just mechanical. It was patterned around isolation. It was designed to ensure you never had to rely on anything or anyone else. Aegis looked down at his hands. For years he had stood alone at the front of every conflict, because he could, because he believed that was strength. Below the research chamber, construction drones moved across the capital's skyline, but they weren't reinforcing existing towers with heavier alloys. They were redesigning them. Flexible support struts, oscillation dampeners built to dissipate stress instead of containing it, materials engineered with intentional elasticity. Military prototypes followed soon after, not thicker hulls, but adaptive frameworks designed to shift under impact and return to equilibrium without storing destructive tension. The first test vessel bent visibly under asteroid collision and did not crack. Weeks later, Aegis returned to the Coliseum of Karen V. The fractured arena floor had been repaired, though faint lines remained where the battle had occurred. The council had requested a ceremony, some declaration of victory or progress. He declined speeches. Instead, he walked to the center of the arena alone. No armor, no amplification. Lyra stood at the edge of the field, observing quietly. The stand were full again, but the mood was different. Curious, reflective. Aegis addressed them without raised volume. "For years," he said, "you believed I was unbreakable." The words carried in the still air. "So did I." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the crowd. "I was wrong." He let the silence sit. "My armor failed because it could not yield. It absorbed everything. It trusted nothing." He turned slightly toward Lyra. "She didn't defeat me with force. She revealed a flaw in my design." He looked back at the audience. Strength without flexibility is not strength. It is tension waiting for the right note. The crowd did not erupt into cheers this time. They listened. Above, the twin suns shifted toward late afternoon, casting long shadows across the arena floor. After the ceremony, he found Lyra waiting near the exit corridor where they had first faced one another. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did." They walked together into the quieter halls beyond the stadium. "Will you rebuild it?" she asked. He thought about the suspended fragments in the lab, the history embedded in each plate. The battle survived. "Not the same way," he said. She studied him. "You still want armor." "I still want protection," he corrected, "but not isolation." They reached the balcony overlooking the Capitol once more. The skyline shimmered, not rigid, but subtly dynamic as new materials shifted with thermal currents. "You change more than technology," he said. "No," she replied softly. "You did." He leaned against the railing. "For the first time in my life," he admitted, "I don't know what I am without it." Lyra rested her hands lightly on the cool metal beside him. "Human," she said. The words settled between them. Simple, unarmored. Far below, the city pulsed with quiet innovation. Not louder, not heavier. Harmonized. Aegis closed his eyes briefly and listened. Not for alarms. Not for threats. Just for the subtle, living frequencies of a world in motion. There was no single dominant tone anymore. No rigid hum of constant resistance. Only shifting layers of sound, flexible, responsive, alive. Once, his armor had been the strongest structure in the system. It had shattered at the lightest touch. And in its place, something far more resilient had begun to resonate.